here speaking with Greene and Tam Sanderson, co-author of the book Remote Works, on that very topic. And leaders and readers who take up this book are challenged to expand their thinking on remote working and the possibilities that it affords. Ali, you have a career in learning development, people operations, culture shaping. You work with brands like Nike, Living Social, and DuckDuckGo. I'm curious, which of your roles stretched you the most?
Oof, that's a great question. All of them in different ways, which is probably a very cliche answer. DuckDuckGo is a fully remote company, and so it led me to really lean into the remote work best practices. Living Social as a startup gave me responsibilities well beyond my years of experience and really jump-started my career. And I did multiple internships at Nike and was never treated like an intern because you really got in there and dealt with leadership training and development. And I got to see the ins and outs of the business from the get-go and use everything I was learning in org psych in real life for the first time. And that was a really eye-opening part of my career. So all three companies were pivotal moments in my career.
Each left you with a gift, which is awesome. That's great. And Tam, you have a career in management consulting, strategic partnerships, corporate development. You've worked with Google, WordPress, and IDEO. Which of your roles had the biggest impact on your future?
Oh, Ali had a really lovely answer to this. I would say, I think probably management consulting because it was my first job out of university. And so I think it feels like my coming of age within the workplace. And so much of how I see still the world and how I think about problems came from my time there. I also got little inklings that I would want to be a remote worker. So in management consulting, you're often kind of traveling full time. And so about a year into that, I was based on a project in El Salvador. And I said, I'm just not going to have an apartment. I'm going to live in hotels instead because I can get it expensed. And so I spent 2 years without a home and using a BlackBerry and learning how to do remote work before I even knew it was a thing. I just thought I was a consultant, but in reality, I was learning a lot of the skills I use today.
Fantastic. Yes. And you referenced that in the book. I enjoyed that. That was a pivotal story in the book for me. I'm curious, first I want to congratulate you on being newly minted authors. This is great. This is fantastic. A lot of people talk about writing books and you guys have done it. So I say congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. And I love the playful nature of your book, the use of games for mindset shifting, visualization and articulating things like purpose. And I love the Mad Libs exercises and I thought it would only be fitting that we use some Mad Libs just to get the conversation going about this book. Are you guys up for that?
Yeah, we love a game.
Who wants to go first?
I can go first.
Go first.
I've got my Mad Lib here ready to go. And so we'll start with, I wanted to write a book on remote work because...
I thought it could be done better.
Okay. And by reading our book, I hope readers will...
improve their remote work lives.
And
dramatic pause. What else do I hope? That I really want people to implement. So to implement remote work practices.
The biggest thing I learned about remote work in writing this book is?
I wrote it with Ali because she lives in a different continent. So I learned how to write a book remotely.
Perfect. And, your first impression upon meeting Ali was?
I saw her picture and she had green hair, and then I met her in real life and she had a different color hair. So it was me trying to see if it was the same Ali with a different hair color.
This is not the same Ali. Yeah. I decided she'd be a great person to write a book with because?
We have very complementary strengths. So she's just really good at structuring and had a lot of really strong ideas on how to bring remote work to life. And so I go very wide and have lots of ideas, and she really kind of brings it in and adds a lot of structure.
The hardest thing about writing a book was?
I would say everything after the book. So self-promotion is not my favorite thing.
Right.
So
Gotcha.
that's the hardest part, is everything besides the writing.
Yeah. And the most rewarding was?
Whenever people are like have read the book and then they feel like really connected to a part of it. So when I feel like we wrote something a year ago that is resonating.
And the best thing about writing this book with Allie was?
I love creating with people. It's fun to create something new with another person.
Perfect. Okay, Allie, you're up.
I'm up.
You ready? I wanted to write a book on remote work because
remote work has totally changed everything about my life for the better.
And
other people deserve that too.
They deserve that too. Okay. And by reading our book, I hope readers will
be very efficient and effective in their remote work practices, and then use that to get all of the benefits in their personal life that I've been able to achieve through remote work.
Okay. And what's the biggest thing I learned about remote work in writing the book is?
That you can have remote work best practices and they're very well intentioned, but you need to sit down and create explicit expectations, or two different best practices might actually conflict with each other, such as what tool to use.
Mm. And my first impression upon meeting Tam was?
That she's just so interesting and is really good at asking people questions.
Curious Tam. I decided she'd be a great person to write a book with because
of how she approaches thinking of the world and how our conversations always lead me to wanting more information.
And the hardest thing about writing a book was?
How long it takes and how you have to sustain that
How long
motivation.
did it take? How long?
About 2 years.
2 years. So this book was 2 years in the making. Okay.
Yeah.
And the most rewarding thing about writing it was?
Holding it in my hands and seeing that it's real, and knowing that people will get to use the advice that we've been wanting to share with people for the past couple of years.
Yeah, that's etched in your mind?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the best thing about writing the book with Allie with Tam was?
That was the only way it was going to get written. If I was left to write it on my own, it would still be sitting in my brain. So Tam and I make great co-authors in that regard. As she talked about, we really help each other where otherwise we'd have our own gaps. So I'm really grateful for you, Tam, for making this project happen with me.
Yeah. Hence the book exists. The teamwork came together and pulled it off. Yeah. So I'm curious, why did this book need to be written and why now? That's for you, Tam.
Oh, yeah. So the genesis of the book, Allie and I were having a pandemic conversation, and we had been remote workers before the pandemic at all remote companies, and it was considered incredibly niche at that time. So Automatic and DuckDuckGo were like two of the most prominent ones, but when I told people I was like working for Automatic, which is WordPress, they thought I was a blogger. Like they didn't totally understand the idea that I had like a fully remote corporate job. And so we were like talking and we were like, showing each other like what was in our refrigerator, which was a popular pandemic thing. I don't know, like, and talking about like how we were like living. And then we just felt like people were missing the boat on like, this is a moment for so much change in how we work and to really question a lot of things. And instead people were just like copying, pasting everything that they did in office, and they were just on Zoom all the time. And we were just like, everybody's missing this like opportunity to really redesign work. And so we just felt like we had a lot to say. And in that conversation, we ended up deciding we would write a book together. And we did. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. And Allie, so I mentioned earlier, the structure of the book is really interesting. It's fun. It's playful. You've got distinct sections. You've got your TLDR exercises, spotlight stories, and experts. What inspired the structure of the book, and how did that come to be?
Yeah, so it's really important to us that we wrote a book about leadership, about business that we ourselves would want to read. And a challenge in my career so far, and I know that Tam can relate in talking with her, is that there isn't a lot of room for being playful, being funny, and just having fun, which are very important vehicles for learning. And why that doesn't exist in a situation where you're supposed to be professional or serious always irked me in a way. It's why can't these things exist in the same space when it's proven that through play, through things being memorable and being funny helps them be memorable. And actually having interactive ways of engaging with content, you are going to learn better and you're going to remember the content in a more meaningful way. And so why can't we incorporate that into our book and know that the content is serious, it is helpful, it's tried and true in our own careers, the careers of our experts, but let's let readers have fun with it and play around and make it their own as well. And so each piece of the interactivity of the book, or each subsection of the book, had very intentional reasons behind it. For example, TLDR, on one surface level, it's a way for you to skim through the book. If you immediately know that you're having challenges because you're hiring new people on your team, then you want to jump to the chapter about the team. And reading the TLDR can help you figure out, oh, I can read this book out of order. There's a chapter I want to return back to and read again because it's more relevant in my situation at work right now. But TLDR is actually also a remote work best practice with asynchronous communication. And so it's doing two goals at once, where we're helping you navigate the book, but we're also showcasing to you how to do something that is a remote work best practice, which is give the person absorbing your communication a little bit of information, enough for them to make a decision. And if they want more, they can dig into it. And so that is one example of how we use that. And things like the exercises and the reflection questions go back to, I have a background in organizational psychology and talking about how you learn and remember things. And Tam also is really interested in sociology and some of these finer topics of social sciences. And you remember by making it relatable to you. And so the reflection questions after each, we decided that, should it be at the end of each chapter? Should it be at the end of the book? How should we do this? And intentionally, it was designed that after each major concept in the book, we wanted a reader to say, okay, how will I bring this back to my team or organization? And that's why the reflection questions are weaved at very pivotal moments where they can say, how does this content relate to me? And make those connections right away.
Yeah, I found the format, helpful and enjoyable. I thought it was great. Tam, when you reflect on your hope in writing this book, we all have hopes as we start things. What was your hope for the role that this book would play in a leader's toolkit?
Yeah, so I think when writing this book, I thought about a past me in like different ways that I was on teams or was like managing projects and wishing that there was more support or guidance to point to. And so when writing this book, it was like, oh, this would have really helped me, my team at that point. And I want it to be something people can come back to. So within like a traditional workshop, people forget 70% by the next day and 90% by the next week. And so we wanted to make our book almost feel like you're in a workshop because it's very interactive and it's pithy and you reflect and it feels more like a conversation within a book. But also something you can continue to go back to. And so you can read Remote Works today, and it may feel very different if you read it in 3 years and you're at a different company in a different position, facing a new challenge. And so we wanted it to be evergreen that you can continue coming back to.
And what research did you do to inform the book?
Yeah, so this is my favorite part. So as a former IDEO designer, I love asking questions. And as Ali mentioned, when we first met in Cape Town, we were both asking people tons of questions and just like wanting to learn more about people's lives. And so this book gave me like a natural avenue. And you might feel like this as well because you get to interview people like we are today. But it was really fun. So we contacted and interviewed 34 different remote experts, and some of them are our friends or different people in our network. But we get to have these conversations and just really understand like how they think about remote work and what are their stories and how they structure their lives. And by having all of that, we synthesized it into, and obviously including our own experiences, but it really added to the flavor of the book. So that was my favorite research. And I really appreciated when we were writing the book, Ali actually really geared us to, I had like a kind of a natural inclination because I was like pulling stuff from book that I had already read And she was like, you know what, really, we should be coming up with our own frameworks. And so it was a really good forcing function that we end up creating our own management styles and creating our own IP. And by doing that, it was really fun. And that was how we used our own research and our own lives and our own observations to create a lot of those frameworks in the book.
In your research doing the book and pulling it together, what did you find are the biggest misconceptions about remote work?
The thing is we were interviewing people that get remote work. So there was like fewer misconceptions amongst that crowd.
What about just in general then?
In general, yeah. So that was where I was going with this. I think that people almost feel like if they've read one listicle on remote work, that they've got it, or they have one tool and they know how to use it. So the idea that I think this is the learning curve of how things happen, that you have this kind of false sense at the very beginning that you know everything. And then like the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know and how things can be better. And it feels like a lot of people are at that kind of false start of like, oh yeah, I've got this whole remote work thing under my belt. I know all the skills, but there's so much more you can do with it. And really diving in and seeing how you can actually completely redesign your organization and your workflow for the better. And so that's, I think, a misconception that remote work is actually a skill and it is something that needs to be built.
And to not just read a list and we're good to go.
Yeah, you can't just do like a Zoom game or have like a cool Zoom background and be like, oh, I got it. I mean, you can remote work that way. It's just not the most effective, in my opinion.
I hear you. So another thing I loved in the book was you outlined 10 different ways in which remote work has changed over the years, and you introduced some questions to readers to help them catch a vision for how they can leverage those changes. And I thought we could tackle this list of 10 things using two things that you introduced us to in the book, your 5 W's and 1 H, and a Mad Libish approach, or like a rapid fire. So I thought when it comes to remote work in 2023, one thing that has changed in each of the following areas is in the who area, Allie.
Or who is your coworker, I think will change in 2023 and continue to change as people work in co-working spaces and coffee shops, as they work from home with other family members, their partners. The term coworker needs to be redefined. And so you're not just working physically anymore in the office with people that work in your same company. You can now work with lots of people, and that can help you bring innovative ideas back to your own company.
And what about in the what, Tam?
So I think with what, when you move your work mostly online, I think what you work on changes and you can outsource a lot of that to technology. So rather than like having these meetings and like humans trying to like create all these lists, you can just put it in Asana, or like instead of having to remember everything in our brain, you can have it in documentation. And so by outsourcing the technology, humans can do the things that are more value add and focus more on meaningful outputs than kind of all that like almost like housekeeping work that happens within an organization.
And Allie, I loved your stories in the book on the when. So hit us with your when? Yeah.
And when is not Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 anymore at all. When can be whenever you want it, whenever you feel most productive, most motivated, most happy. I personally do reverse weeks. I work on weekends and take weekdays off. I love nonlinear work days, working in chunks throughout the weekdays. We also talk about energy tracking in the book, where we work according to our own biological rhythms. Tam is a classic case of the night owl, and that suits me, being time zones apart, because I get to wake up to information that I can use in my own workday. And so if anything, like if you're going to work remotely as a company, don't make people work standard hours according to one time zone. That is very outdated at this point in time.
Let's hear it for the night owls, Tam.
Yeah,
we'll stand united. What about in the why?
What time did you go to sleep last night?
Last night was a late night. It was a late night.
It
was at 12?
2 in the morning.
2 in the morning. So is that typical for you?
Yeah, but I don't have children, so that might be part of it. But yeah, I'm leaned deeply into night owlism as a remote worker.
Yeah, I hear you. And what about the why?
I think why, the why becomes more important. So with remote work, it puts a magnifying glass on the good, bad, and ugly of an organization. You can't hide it as much with like, oh, cool perk, or here's like, you can play ping pong, or, all that stuff. Instead, it's actually more about the work. And so you have to actually care about what you're doing. It has to connect to a bigger purpose. And you need to feel connected to what things are going on. And so one thing I loved about Automatic is everything is posted on internal blog posts. So you go in and you have a complete record of everything that's happened at the organization. And as Ali mentioned, I'm a very curious person. So I had all this information. And it was very funny. When I joined Automatic, I actually could see on the blog post all the meetings I had with my former team at Google. And I actually learned more about my Google team through Automatic than I did on that team. And so by feeling that you have that information, you feel really included and that you actually are a really big part of that organization. And so I think the why, you have to feel connected to what the company is doing and the mission of the company and the direction it's going, so that you feel that you have agency and you're contributing to it.
Yeah, we've certainly seen that manifested in people's movements over the last couple of years, and connecting to the why seemed to be paramount, front of mind for many. What about the where, Ali?
Where, again, no longer cubicles, no longer open space floor plans in offices. Where becomes your personal choice. Where do you get your work done best? For some people, that's a coffee shop. That's me. For other people, it's a quiet home office where they have all of their amenities close at hand. It is whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, and bring us home with the how, Tam.
Ooh, I'm going to have a personal thing for the how. So I think in traditional work, you always had to work in kind of like a marathon format of like staying in the office for 8 or 9 hours. When I was in private equity and in management consulting, the hours were a lot longer than that. But I work best in sprints. And so I've been able to completely change how I work, where I will get really focused and I will be able to do a ton of work in a short amount of time. And then I can relax and have more kind of, I'm thinking and like digesting things. And so it's really just changed how I work and how I produce output and how I think about what it means to create work. It's not about the time that I sit in a chair. It's more about what I'm creating. And that's been really powerful.
That's great. And thanks for that. Thanks for playing along. Ali, in the book, you introduce some interesting concepts, and one of them is the remote work collaboration kickoff. And I'm just curious, what is it? What purpose does it serve? What format does it follow? Why don't you just tell us about it?
Yeah, so this idea really stems from when you have a project kickoff. It's an opportunity to sit down and talk about the clear goals of the project, the milestones of the project, get everyone on the same page in a way that's setting expectations very explicitly. And I think there should be a word count of how many times in an interview or in the book I use the word expectation setting, because it's one of those things that's deep in my core of what's important with teams and work and even in your personal life. And so the remote work collaboration kickoff is an opportunity to set explicit expectations with someone that you're going to be partnering with on a team about how you work best, and come up with agreements that can fit both of your individual personal preferences at work. So as I mentioned earlier, Tam's a night owl. If her and I worked on the same time zone, I'm not a night owl. I am what you call bifastic. I work best in nonlinear work days, but I definitely go to bed very early. And so if Tam and I were working together and we didn't have a collaboration kickoff, we could have all of this tension, and our conflict stage of team development would last a lot longer, because we weren't addressing issues such as when could we have meetings, when can we have check-ins with each other, how back and forth can our asynchronous communication happen, what does that cadence look like for us to move projects forward. All of these things that when you're in an office environment, you're told when they happen by the natural format and design of a 9-to-5 workday when you come into a building. And so the purpose of the collaboration kickoff is to get everyone on the same page about what are your personal preferences when it comes to getting the work done. And if there's differences, how can you make sure that you're finding ways to work together that honor all of those differences, whether it's leaning more into asynchronous communication or just bouncing back and forth, having a morning meeting on some weeks and evening meetings on other weeks. And so the format can really be designed by you and your team. And that's what I love about our book is we don't prescribe any one sort of format, but it generally should look like you introducing yourself, sharing your self-awareness around how you like to work, around things like communication, a preference for synchronous and asynchronous, what kind of time zone structure you like to work in, how you like to receive feedback, how you give feedback, hearing that from the other person and putting these agreements into place for how you can best work with one another.
And was it just the two of you at your collaboration kickoff?
For me and Tam?
Yeah, for the book. Was it just the two of you? Or
nobody else.
Can I come to the next one? Can I come to the...
And the great thing is we have them often because personal preferences can also shift over time and you learn new things about yourself.
Right.
We recently really solidified the fact that I do a little bit of work every day, even on weekends, and I don't work well in sprint mode. And that's completely opposite of Tam, who does sprints, and then I wake up with a lot of information. And we've had really interesting conversations about why we both do that and what it means and how we can use that to our benefit. And it's been really fun to revisit these conversations. So collaboration kickoffs are not do it once and then check it off a list. Yay, I'm a good manager. It's do it every time you're learning new things about yourself or you think your employee is learning new things about themselves.
Yeah, when you would like to propose, I'd like to propose an amendment to our collaboration kickoff.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would like to just add one thing to it. So as Ali mentioned, we have different styles. I'm a sprinter and she's kind of more of a marathoner. But rather than saying, Ali, you need to work in sprints just like me, or her saying like, Tam, you have to work just like me. Instead, we're finding ways to balance both of our working styles and set expectations differently. And I think that's really important because so much in like a larger organization, you're just told like you need to work exactly like the person that's the most senior in the room. And instead, a collaboration kickoff helps you to, I don't know, reimagine how you can both work really well together. And it may look different, but it's not necessarily adapting to one person's style.
Yeah, and to factor everyone in. That's fantastic. Let's talk about team charters, Ali. How do you define a team charter? It's a term that does get thrown around a little bit. So let's get your definition of what it is and what your thoughts are on team charters.
It does. So if you think about a collaboration kickoff being a one-on-one agreement of how you work together with one person, a team charter is the next level of that. Now you have a group of people that are learning how to operate with each other. And a team charter really defines what the behavioral norms are, or something I like to call the standard operating behaviors for a team. And that's really what are the things that are going to be rewarded, the behaviors and the rituals and the competencies that we want to promote within our team. Things like being very detail-oriented in our asynchronous communication, or using TLDRs, or using asynchronous over jumping on calls. All of these finer details are behaviors that you reward informally or formally within your team versus operating behaviors that you want to dissuade people from doing, such as that Slack message of, hey, are you there? Or can we jump on a call real quick? Those are common things I see in business that nobody really addresses. They just let slide. And so a team charter is a way, both a living document, an artifact, but more importantly, the process in which you define team norms.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I really loved about your book was the mashup theory, or the blending on the motivation theories, and bringing them together. And kudos to bringing that. That was a particular fascinating point for me. How does a team charter feed into motivation theory and address things like security, mastery, and autonomy?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So it really allows you space to talk about things at a team level of how do we as a team recognize excellent work, and that feeds into motivational theory. And so for some people, it might really be about that public recognition, and there can be rituals that you create on your team to provide that kudos to people. For other people, seeing things in a written document and knowing what's expected of them gives them the security to really play in their own lane and push the boundaries as much as they know is safe to do so. So it's creating that psychological safety on their team to experiment within certain boundaries. And that can be really motivating for some people. And the process of creating it in itself is a really like team-oriented process where you're collaborating with each other, you're hearing each other out, you're taking into account personal differences and similarities. And that can be really rewarding and motivating for someone who has a natural need for attribution, who just wants to be part of the team and be a team player. And so I think there's a lot of fun ways to look at a team charter, not just for what it includes, such as how do we have team meetings, what kinds of things do we need to learn to be better, like have the right skill set for our team, but even the process of building it out and talking about these things can really tap into those motivational theories.
I'm also curious, when does a team charter become a team manifesto?
How do you define a team manifesto? I guess would be my question.
Exactly. It just seems like it's the next level of team charter. But yeah, no, that's fantastic. And Tam, let's talk about digital houses. So this is another concept you introduced. How do you define a digital house, and why is having your digital house in order exceptionally important for remote work?
Yeah, so I like love this concept, and it came from our friend Sarah, who we were interviewing, but it just really, really resonated with us. And so essentially you go into an office space, and just from a design perspective, we get all these cues on how to wayfind an organization. And so like at your desk, you're probably, and especially if you have a whole stand, right, with like a laptop and a display, that, okay, I'm going to be on my computer here, or there might be a phone, you take calls, so you know what you do at your desk. Then you go to a meeting room and you know what you do based on how the setup of that meeting room is. If it's a smaller one, it might be a more intimate conversation. If it's a larger one, it might be more for all hands and things of that sort. You go to the coffee machine, that's where you get some gossip. Maybe after work, there's a happy hour. And so you know what happens by just walking into a physical building. But then everything is collapsed on a 13-inch screen. You're working from home and you're like, where is everything? And so instead, you're just like tapping between all these different tabs and you're like, where is it? And it's really hard to navigate. And that's a lot of the reasons why, when people first created the PCs, we used a lot of things from the physical world as signals of what to do on the computer. So you have a little trash bin, and that's where you like delete your old documents, or you have like files, and that's where you keep things. And it's because like that's what happened in the physical world. And so you have to do the same thing when moving your organization to a remote way of working. You have to have those signals of like what type of work happens where. And if you don't have that, it gets really confusing and really messy. And so that comes into the next thing of just tidying up your house. So we took the kind of from Marie Kondo. I went through a whole moment of time where I got deeply into the magical art of tidying up. But she has this whole thing of like, does this give me joy? And if not, you get rid of it. You thank it for existing. You also put everything in a very specific place, and then everything is decluttered, and you just have this like really lovely life. And that did happen to me for a moment in time when I lived in Singapore. But we recommend the same thing for your workspace. Like, how do you know where things are, and how can you make it really clear for people? Because essentially, as you work remotely, people are working on nonlinear schedules, they're working from different time zones. And you have to have people be able to find information without pinging a bunch of people asking where it's at. And so by having those clear rules, it makes it just so much easier to navigate your workspace.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that what you're not saying there is that if a report doesn't give you joy or give you the result that you want, it doesn't give you a full range just to delete it.
Probably not.
Probably not.
But if it doesn't give you a joy in a certain way of it's not useful anymore. So yeah, maybe it needs to be tailored to the work environment. There's a lot of things that, for example, one thing that does not give me joy is my taxes. But if I just put that in the like the trash can on my computer, I would get in a lot of trouble. So yes, it can't completely apply, but at least you can try to make it as joyful as possible. So even with taxes, how can you make it a little bit easier?
Exactly. And when somebody cracks that problem, there's another book to be written for sure.
That won't be written by me, that's for sure. But if somebody wants to, I say, yeah, go for it. I'll read it.
When you take a look at the most trends that you see emerging in remote work, what are you seeing, Tam?
I I think people are starting to realize the benefits of remote work. So Allie and I often say, like, we used to organize our entire lives around work. And so if I think about my own life, I moved to places because of work. I scheduled all of my time around work. My colleagues were basically my only friends because like of how much my life revolved around work. And now as you're flipping that, you can start designing work around your life. And so there's actually been some really like positive articles that have come out just from the last 3 years of people are able to spend more time with their families. They're more likely to commit to their partnerships. They're more likely to say, yes, I think I can have a child. And all these things used to feel very cumbersome with the way that we used to work. And it's just really hard to manage a family with work at the same time. And there's also this concept called the two-body problem. And that was very popular actually when I was in Singapore with expats of like, one person has a job opportunity in a different country and one person has a job opportunity in the home country. And like, what do you do? And essentially you have to sacrifice, is it one person's career for the relationship? And so I just love that, like, I am seeing people make real changes with remote work that is actually really benefiting their lives, because that's ultimately what I'm motivated by. And I even have had friends like a friend from college, and I graduated in 2006, and he like pinged me out of the blue and he was like, Tam, I love what you're saying. We had a two-body problem. He's a lawyer with the military. She worked for Teach for America. And he was like, without remote work, I would have had to like leave my job and find something else that was located near my wife. And so he was just like, remote work solved this whole thing. And we're both able to be our best in our career. And I just like love hearing that because it feels like it's making a real impact. It's more than just a Zoom call.
Yeah, the introduction of remote work is game changer for a lot of people, and they've had to make less sacrifices on that front, as you well know. So we're nearing the end here, so I've got one last Mad Lib for you, and I'm just going to throw it out there, and you can answer when you're ready. The most important thing that makes remote work is
intentionality.
Intentionality. Why do you say that?
You really have to consider other people and where they're coming from. You can't just expect everybody to follow your norm. And so you have to be intentional with your communication. You have to be intentional with declaring kind of what you need and what you want at work. You have to make things more transparent. You have to be more thoughtful. So I think, yeah, it's just, if without intention, you can't really make remote work well.
What about you, Allie?
Yeah, that was a good one. I would say similar to intentionality, but breaking it down into more specific concepts. Trust meeting people where they are at and setting clear expectations. Yeah, but all of that can be summed up by intentionality, I would say.
It's the same and it's different. And it's
we wrote a book together.
Yes, exactly.
We're very philosophically aligned.
Yeah. And, it's interesting on that front. So you both dedicated this chapter of your career to evangelizing remote work. And if you were to speak directly from your heart into the heart of other leaders out there, what's the one thing that you would say to them on this topic?
I'll go first, I guess. I just think there's so much noise right now about work in general, complications about the media pitting employers and employees against each other and creating power struggles, whether it's around topics like layoffs or return to office, concepts about 4-day work weeks and trying to glamorize that. I think there's a lot of noise that is existing. And I think if we strip away all of that noise, I would just want leaders to really sit down and think, why would you not want to help your company and your team be more effective in their work, efficient when it comes to getting the work done in a quality way? And outside of that, just then letting go and trusting that if your team can create a happy life for themselves and they are into the mission of what you're doing, that they want to be there. And this is the way forward to create a world that's really mutually beneficial for everybody. And we can all stop playing these games of trying to show up and make work look like something. Everybody can just play their part in making really cool innovations, doing a job well done, and then living according to their values. I think if anything, the past couple of years, everybody has learned the importance of living according to their values, and there just needs to be more of that in the world.
Very good answer, Allie.
Yeah, great answer.
I will chime in. So the thing I think a lot about is there's been studies that after sleep, the number 2 thing that you'll spend your life doing is work. And cumulatively, that is 13 years and 2 months. And so it is a huge part of our lives. And I think as leaders, I think there's actually like a moral imperative to make sure that that time adds as much to the person's human life. And so through remote work, you give people a lot more freedom, flexibility, and focus, like the tagline of our book, but you also allow them to be self-directed, make decisions for their lives, have more autonomy. And I think ultimately that's a huge win for the person. And so if you don't have to work in person, if you don't have to be located 20 miles from and work a headquarters, and sometimes you do. So there's some jobs that are harder to do remotely. But if it's not a requirement for the work people are doing, why make them commute every day? Why make them have to decide where they live based on where you've decided to put your office? Why make them sit for 8 hours a day if that's actually not the best way for them to work? And so instead, you're allowing people to design their lives that fits them. And I just think that's a huge thing. And there's a lot of talk about mental health right now. And I think remote work is done well. It naturally aids mental health because you're able to have separation between work and you can find ways to de-stress in your life.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic and ties right back to your motivational theory mashup that you guys created. That's fantastic. I'm curious, any other books in your future together independently?
We definitely brainstorm about other books. And so I think part of it is we're deciding when we would have energy to write one again. But I know that we have ideas for sure. And then separately, I can answer for myself. I really enjoy writing. So I have kids' books in mind. I have a middle grade book I want to write. I have a thriller book. I have a lot of things that I would like to write. I just know though that writing is hard. Writing takes a lot of time, and this is the second book I've written. I've had one published. So some of it is just you have to have something that's motivational enough to help you get over the hard work that it is writing a book. It will take a lot of time and effort. And so I'm waiting for that moment again. But right now, our book's only been out for a month. So I just hope
let's just celebrate this one. Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Allie?
Yeah, I'm gonna steal a line from my partner and say present moment.
Right.
Never say never, but right now I just want to focus on remote works and continuing to, evangelize the content in this book and help people get it, because every day I'm surprised that people still are not there yet.
Yeah, I hear you. So I'm going to invite you to close us off with how you started the book, with the poem that you wrote. And I know that you guys have wrote that together, I'm assuming. So I'm going to invite you to give us a nice dramatic reading of that poem and maybe explain how it came to be.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So as mentioned, we do like to be playful. And this came from Goodnight Moon when we were thinking of different ways to introduce or have a dedication for a book. So thank you, laptop warriors and email curators. Thank you, office traders. Thank you, status quo instigators.
Thank you, 9-to-5 meddlers. Thank you, digital nomads here and there. Thank you, remote workers everywhere.
Thank you, passenger seat of my car. Thank you, homes near and far. Thank you, library and coffee shop.
Thank you, patio, sofa, and desktop. Thank you, airport lounge and your comfy chair. Thank you to co-working spaces everywhere. And yes, those are all places that we have remote worked that are mentioned in that.
Yeah, for sure. This is a poem birthed out of real life, and it gets you right there. Thank you. Yes, I'm being facetious, but thank you for investing the time today to come and share about your book, and thank you for investing the time to write it. It's certainly an important topic. I actually got a lot more out of the book than I was expecting to just going into it. So I want to say thank you for the thought, care, effort, fun that you poured into that work. And thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having us. Bye.